The deafening crack of a gunshot echoed through Willow Creek's dusty Main Street as 19-year-old Nora Owens dropped to her knees, watching her father collapse in a heap before her. The year was 1876, and in that moment, everything she had ever known shattered like glass beneath a boot heel. "Pa!" she screamed, scrambling through the dirt to reach him. Blood bloomed across his chest, staining his once white shirt a horrific crimson. His eyes, already growing distant, found hers one last time. "Don't give up, Nora," he whispered, his breath ragged. "Promise me you won't give up." "I won't, Pa," she sobbed, clutching his calloused hand as the light faded from his eyes. "I promise." Around her, the small Montana town buzzed with activity. Some rushed to help, others backed away, eyes darting toward the saloon where the shot had originated. Sheriff Miller pushed through the gathering crowd, his face grim as he knelt beside her. "I'm sorry, Miss Owens," he said, placing a weathered hand on her shoulder. "Your pa was a good man." Nora barely heard him. Her eyes remained fixed on her father's peaceful face, so different from the determined expression he'd worn just minutes earlier when he'd confronted Harlan Price about the money he was owed. Price, the wealthiest man in the county, owner of half the businesses in town and all of the surrounding cattle land, had laughed in Thomas Owens' face. The laughter had stopped when her father mentioned the ledger, the one that proved Price had been cheating every rancher and farmer in the territory for years. The one her father had hidden away for safekeeping, the one that now made Nora Owens a marked woman. 2 days later, Nora stood beside her father's fresh grave, the spring wind tugging at her black dress. The small gathering of townspeople had already dispersed, leaving her alone with her grief and a mountain of debt. Her family's farm, once prosperous, had fallen on hard times after the drought. Her mother had succumbed to consumption 3 years prior, and now with her father gone, Nora was truly alone. "Miss Owens." Sheriff Miller approached, hat in hand, his expression troubled. "I've come to tell you that Harlan Price is claiming self-defense, says your father drew on him first." "That's a lie," Nora said, her voice steady despite her tears. "My father never carried a gun, you know that, Sheriff." "I know, but Price has witnesses. His men are backing his story." "Of course they are," she said bitterly. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "There's something else. Price is calling in your father's debts, says you have until the end of the month to pay or he'll take the farm." 30 days. Nora's mind raced. The farm was mortgaged to the hilt, and the spring planting hadn't even begun. There was no way she could come up with that kind of money. Not without the proof her father had hidden, proof that Price owed them and many others far more than they'd ever owed him. "That ledger your pa mentioned," the sheriff said, lowering his voice. "If it exists, it might be the only thing that could save not just your farm, but a lot of folks around here. Price has been squeezing everyone dry for years." "I'll find it," Nora promised, though she had no idea where her father might have hidden such an important document. "And when I do, Price will pay for what he's done." Sheriff Miller sighed, placing his hat back on his head. "Be careful, girl. Price is a dangerous man, and you've already lost too much." As the sheriff walked away, Nora turned back to her father's grave. "I'll make this right, Pa," she whispered. "I promise." The Owens farmhouse sat on a modest plot of land a few miles outside of town. The 2-story white clapboard structure had seen better days, but it was home the only one Nora had ever known. As she guided her horse up the dusty path, she noticed a group of men loitering near the barn. Her heart sank when she recognized Harlan Price's foreman, a cruel-faced man named Silas Burke. He approached her wagon, a smirk playing on his lips. "Miss Owens," he called. "Mr. Price sent us to help you pack." Nora straightened her spine. "The sheriff informed me I have until the end of the month." Burke shrugged. "Mr. Price reconsidered. Says a woman alone has no business running a farm anyway. He's being generous, offering to buy you a ticket east. You've got family in Boston, ain't that right?" "I'm not going anywhere," Nora said, her hands tightening on the reins. "This is my land, and I intend to work it." The men exchanged amused glances. "And how do you plan to do that?" Burke asked. "Plant and harvest all on your lonesome. Be reasonable, girl." "I'll hire help," she said, though she knew she couldn't afford it. Nobody'll work for you, Burke said flatly. Not if they want to keep breathing. Price owns this county, and the sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be. You have no right to be on my property, Nora said, reaching for her father's old shotgun that lay beside her on the wagon seat. Leave now, Burke laughed, but he and his men backed away. We'll be back tomorrow, Miss Owens, with the sheriff and the proper papers. Enjoy your last night in your daddy's house. As they rode away, Nora let out a shaky breath. She had one night to find the ledger and figure out a plan. If she failed, she'd lose everything. The night passed in a frantic search. Nora tore through her father's study, checking every book, looking behind every painting, pulling up floorboards. By dawn, exhausted and filthy, she had found nothing. She collapsed into her father's chair, tears streaming down her face. "Where did you hide it, Pa?" she whispered. "I need it now more than ever." A knock at the door startled her. Rising warily, shotgun in hand, she approached the front entrance. "Who's there?" "Name's Wade Jackson, madam," came a deep voice. "I heard you might be looking for farmhands." Nora opened the door a crack, pointing the shotgun through the opening. On her porch stood a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. He wore trail-worn clothes and a dusty cowboy hat, which he promptly removed upon seeing her. "Apologies for startling you, Miss Owens," he said, eyeing the shotgun with respect but no fear. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Fletcher, mentioned you might need help with spring planting." Nora lowered the gun slightly. "Mrs. Fletcher was mistaken. I can't afford to hire anyone." "I'm not asking for payment up front," Wade said. "I'll take a share of the harvest." Nora frowned. "That's a risk. The harvest is months away and there's no guarantee it'll be good." "I've taken bigger risks," he said simply. "Besides, I knew your father. He helped me once when no one else would." "I'd like to return the favor." Nora studied him suspiciously. "I don't recall seeing you around here before." "I've been away," he admitted. "Army, then some time working cattle drives up north. Just got back to these parts a week ago." She hesitated. A strong pair of hands would certainly help, but trusting a stranger seemed foolish, especially now. "Price's men will be here any minute with papers to take my farm. Your timing couldn't be worse, Mr. Jackson." Wade's expression darkened. "Harlan Price, that explains a lot." He glanced over his shoulder at the approaching dust cloud on the road. "May I come in, Miss Owens? I believe we have matters to discuss before the sheriff arrives." Against her better judgment, Nora stepped back, allowing him entry. "Whatever you have to say, make it quick." Wade strode into the house, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. "Your father had proof of Price's illegal dealings, didn't he? That's why he was killed." Nora stiffened. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've been tracking Price for 2 years," Wade said grimly. "He's not just cheating farmers out of their land. He's running guns to hostile Indian tribes, stirring up trouble so the army will clear out settlers and he can buy up more territory. I'm working with the U.S. Marshal's office to bring him down." Hope flared in Nora's chest for the first time since her father's death. "You're a lawman." "Not officially," Wade admitted. "More of a concerned citizen with connections, but I need that ledger your father mentioned. It's the final piece of evidence we need." Nora's shoulders slumped. "I've searched everywhere. I can't find it." The sound of horses and a wagon approaching drew their attention to the window. Sheriff Miller had arrived with Burke and 2 other men. "We're out of time," Wade muttered. He turned to Nora, his expression intense. "Do you trust me, Miss Owens?" "I don't even know you," she protested. "Fair enough," he conceded. "But right now, I'm your only chance of keeping this farm and getting justice for your father." Nora took a deep breath, weighing her options. She had none. "What do you propose, Mr. Jackson?" "A marriage of convenience," he said calmly, as if suggesting nothing more remarkable than the weather. "Price can't legally seize property from a married woman if her husband assumes the debts. It'll buy us time to find the ledger." "You're insane," Nora gasped. "I can't marry a complete stranger." "It's either that or lose everything," Wade said, nodding toward the men now dismounting outside. "I give you my word as a gentleman that it would be in name only until we bring Price to justice. After that, if you wish, we can quietly annul it." A sharp knock at the door punctuated his words. "Miss Owens," the sheriff called, "I need to speak with you." Nora looked from the door to Wade, her mind racing. Why would you do this? What's in it for you? Justice, Wade said simply. Price killed my brother too. Different circumstances, same result. I promised myself I'd see him hang. His blue eyes softened. Your father was a good man. He deserves justice as well. Another knock, more insistent this time. Miss Owens, what's it going to be? Wade asked quietly. Nora squared her shoulders and made the decision that would change her life forever. Sheriff Miller. She called, moving to the door. I'm glad you're here. I'd like you to witness something. 20 minutes later, Nora stood in stunned silence as Sheriff Miller pronounced her and Wade husband and wife. The hasty ceremony, performed in her father's study, felt surreal. Burke and his men had watched in furious disbelief as Wade signed the marriage certificate, and then the papers assuming Thomas Owens' debts to Harlan Price. This ain't over, Burke hissed as he stormed out, the other men following. Price won't stand for this. Sheriff Miller lingered after they left. You know what you've done, don't you? He asked Nora. Price will come after both of you now. This marriage won't protect you for long if you can't find that ledger. We'll find it, Wade assured him. And when we do, I expect the law to do right by Mrs. Jackson. The sheriff nodded gravely. Just be careful, and congratulations, I suppose. With a tip of his hat, he departed, leaving the newly wed strangers alone in the quiet house. Nora sank into a chair, the events of the morning overwhelming her. I must be out of my mind, she murmured. Maybe, Wade agreed, taking a seat across from her, but sometimes crazy decisions are the only ones worth making. She looked up at him, studying his face properly for the first time. There was an honesty in his features that she found reassuring, despite the madness of their situation. Tell me about your brother, she said, and why you're really here. Wade removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. My brother Daniel was a geologist. He discovered gold on land that Price wanted. When he refused to sell, there was an accident at his claim. Cave in. By the time anyone found him, it was too late. I'm sorry, Nora said softly. The local law ruled it an accident, but I knew better. Daniel was experienced. He wouldn't make the kind of mistakes that would cause a cave-in. Wade's jaw tightened. I started asking questions, and suddenly I found myself facing charges for a robbery I didn't commit, had to leave the territory in a hurry. And now you're back working with the marshals, Wade nodded. Took a while to convince them I was innocent and Price was the real criminal. They finally sent me back to gather evidence. Your father's ledger could be the key to everything. Nora rose, pacing the room. I've searched everywhere I can think of. If he hid it here, it's in a place I don't know about. What about places outside the house? Wade suggested. Somewhere meaningful to him. Nora stopped, a memory surfacing. There's the old oak tree by the creek. We used to picnic there when I was a child. My mother is buried beneath it. It's worth a look, Wade said, standing. But first we should get some food in you. You look about ready to collapse. As Wade prepared a simple meal from the supplies in her pantry, Nora watched him move efficiently around her kitchen. It was strange having a man in the house again, especially one who was technically her husband. The gold band on her finger, her mother's ring, which she'd retrieved from her jewelry box for the ceremony, felt foreign and heavy. This is temporary, she reminded herself aloud. Once we find the ledger and Price is dealt with, we'll go our separate ways. Wade glanced at her over his shoulder. Of course, he agreed, though something in his tone made her wonder if he believed it. Though I should warn you, bringing down a man like Price won't happen overnight. We might be married for some time. As long as it's understood that this is an arrangement of necessity, not anything else. Wade placed a plate of eggs and bacon before her. Perfectly understood, Mrs. Jackson. Now eat, we have a ledger to find. After breakfast, they rode to the oak tree by the creek. The spring sunshine filtered through the new leaves, dappling the ground where wildflowers had begun to bloom around the simple stone marking Martha Owens' final resting place. My mother loved it here, Nora said, dismounting. She said it was the most peaceful spot on the whole farm. Wade examined the massive tree, running his hands along the trunk. Look for anything unusual, a hollow, a marking, anything that might indicate a hiding spot. They searched for over an hour, checking the ground around the tree, the branches they could reach, even wading into the creek to see if something had been hidden beneath the water. Nothing. Nora sat on a large root, frustration evident in her posture. If Pa hid something here, he did too good a job of it. Wade crouched beside her mother's headstone, brushing away some dirt. When did your mother pass? 3 years ago. Consumption took her quickly at the end. Nora's voice caught. Pa was never the same after. Wade nodded sympathetically, then frowned, leaning closer to the stone. Did your father carve this himself? Yes. Why? There's something unusual about these markings. Wade pointed to what appeared to be decorative engravings along the base of the stone. These aren't just ornamental. They're numbers. Nora hurried over, kneeling beside him. Sure enough, barely visible unless you were looking for them, a series of numbers had been carved into the stone. 7/21/1860. What do they mean? She wondered. Could be a date, Wade suggested. July 21, 1860. Nora shook her head. That doesn't make sense. My parents weren't even married then. What about a location? Pages in a book, maybe? Nora's eyes widened. The family Bible, Pa read from it every night. It's on his bedside table. They raced back to the house, and Nora retrieved the massive leather-bound Bible. Her hands trembled as she turned to the book of Psalms, chapter 7, verse 21. There's nothing here, she said, disappointment evident. The verse doesn't even exist. Try chapter 18, verse 60, Wade suggested. Same problem. Nora closed the Bible, thinking, wait. What if it's not the Bible at all? Pa had a favorite book of poetry. Mother gave it to him on their wedding day. She hurried to her father's study and pulled a worn volume of Wordsworth from the shelf. Turning to page 7, line 21, she ran her finger across the text, nothing unusual. She tried page 18, line 60, with the same result. Maybe we're overthinking this, Wade said, taking the book from her hands and examining the binding. Sometimes the simplest hiding places are the best. He carefully pulled back the binding, revealing a thin space between the cover and the first page. A folded piece of paper had been inserted there, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it. Pa, you clever man, Nora whispered as Wade extracted the paper. It wasn't the ledger, but a letter in Thomas Owens' handwriting. To whoever finds this, likely my daughter, if you've decoded my clue. The evidence against Harlan Price is too dangerous to keep in one place. I've divided the ledger pages and hidden them across the county with people I trust. The first is with Walter Green at the mill. He'll give you the next location. Be careful. Trust no one else. Thomas Owens. Wade whistled softly. Your father was a cautious man. And a smart one, Nora added. If Price's men searched the house after his death, they wouldn't have found anything. We should go to Green's mill right away, Wade said, folding the note carefully. But we need to be discreet. Price probably has eyes all over town by now. As they prepared to leave, Nora changed into a simple riding dress and packed a small bag with essentials. This might be the beginning of a longer journey than she'd anticipated. I should warn you, she said as Wade helped her onto her horse. People in town already think I'm a bit peculiar. How so? After Mother died, Pa fell into drink for a while. I kept the farm going, did jobs most women wouldn't, breaking horses, repairing fences, haggling with merchants. Some folks thought it wasn't proper. Wade smiled, a warm expression that reached his eyes. Sounds like you're just capable, not peculiar. That's kind of you to say, but you'll hear the whispers soon enough. That odd Owens girl thinking she can run a farm like a man. Well, that odd Owens girl is now Mrs. Jackson, Wade said, mounting his own horse. And I, for one, am grateful for her capabilities. They rode toward town, keeping to the back roads. The spring air was fresh with promise, the fields around them showing the first green shoots of new growth. In another life, another time, Nora might have enjoyed the ride with the handsome cowboy at her side. Instead, her thoughts remained fixed on her father's murder and the evidence they sought. Green's mill sat on the river at the edge of town. The water-powered sawmill was the lifeblood of the local lumber industry, and Walter Green had been a friend of her father's for as long as Nora could remember. Let me go in alone, she suggested as they approached. Mr. Green knows me, and 2 strangers might draw attention. Wade nodded, though he looked uneasy. I'll wait by the river. If you're not back in 15 minutes, I'm coming in after you. Nora made her way to the mill office, trying to appear casual despite her racing heart. The familiar smell of fresh cut lumber filled the air as she entered the small building. "Mr. Green," she called. There was no answer. The office, usually meticulously kept, was in disarray. Papers were scattered across the floor and a chair had been overturned. Alarm bells rang in Nora's mind. "Mr. Green?" She tried again, more urgently. A noise from the back room drew her attention. Moving cautiously, Nora pushed open the door to find Walter Green slumped at his desk, a bloody gash across his forehead. "Mr. Green." She rushed to his side, relief washing over her when she found him breathing. "What happened?" The older man's eyes fluttered open. "Nora," he croaked, "you shouldn't be here. They were just here looking for you." "Price's men?" she asked, helping him sit up. Green nodded weakly. "They knew about the ledger page. Someone told them." Cold dread settled in Nora's stomach. "Are you saying we have a traitor, someone who knew about my father's plan?" "I don't know," Green admitted. "But they took the page your father left with me, said they were heading to the church next." Pastor Williams had another piece. Nora helped Green to a chair. "We need to warn the pastor. Can you ride?" "Not in this state," he said, grimacing. "But you need to hurry. They left only minutes ago." "Thank you," Nora said, turning to leave. "Is there anything else I should know?" Green caught her arm. "Be careful who you trust, Nora. Your father's death wasn't just about money. There's something bigger at stake, something about the railroad coming through." The railroad, of course. If the proposed line came through Willow Creek, the value of the surrounding land would skyrocket. Price must be positioning himself to control as much territory as possible before the announcement was made public. Nora hurried back to Wade, explaining the situation as they mounted their horses. "We need to get to the church before Price's men do," Wade said grimly. "And we need to figure out who else knows about your father's evidence." They galloped toward town, taking a shortcut through the woods that would bring them to the church faster than the main road. As they rode, Nora's mind whirled with possibilities. Who could have betrayed her father's trust? Who even knew about the ledger besides the people who had pages? The small white church appeared through the trees, its steeple reaching toward the clear blue sky. They slowed their horses, approaching cautiously. "Everything looks normal," Wade observed. "No sign of Burke or his men." "Maybe we beat them here," Nora said hopefully. They tied their horses behind the church and approached the side door that led to Pastor Williams' study. Wade drew his revolver, motioning for Nora to stay behind him as he knocked softly. The door opened to reveal the elderly pastor, his kind face creasing in surprise when he saw them. "Nora Owens, and who might this be?" "This is Wade Jackson, my husband," Nora said, the words still strange on her tongue. "May we come in, Pastor? It's urgent." The pastor's eyebrows rose at the word husband, but he stepped aside, allowing them entry. Once inside the small office, Wade explained the situation while keeping watch through the window. "I see," Pastor Williams said when they'd finished. "Thomas did indeed leave something in my care, though he never explained what it was, only that I should give it to Nora if anything happened to him." The pastor moved to a bookshelf, removing a large volume of sermons. Opening it, he revealed a hollow interior where several pages of accounting ledgers had been hidden. "Here," he said, handing them to Nora. "I pray these help bring Thomas's killer to justice." Nora scanned the pages quickly. They detailed loans made to several farmers and ranchers in the area, with interest rates far higher than what Price had claimed publicly. More damning were entries showing payments to local officials, including Judge Reynolds, who would have presided over any legal proceedings against Price. "This is good," Wade said, looking over her shoulder, "but we need the rest to show the full extent of his crimes." Pastor Williams closed the hollow book. "Thomas mentioned one other person who had information, Sarah Miller." "The sheriff's wife?" Nora asked, surprised. The pastor nodded. "Thomas trusted few people, but Sarah was one of them. I believe he left something with her as well." Wade frowned. "We need to be careful approaching the sheriff's house. If Price has bought off Judge Reynolds, he might have the sheriff in his pocket too." "Sheriff Miller seemed genuinely concerned for me," Nora pointed out. "He warned me about Price." Could be a ploy to gain your trust, Wade countered. We can't take chances. A sound from outside drew their attention. Wade peered through the curtains, then cursed under his breath. Burke and his men, they're surrounding the church. Pastor Williams moved to a small door at the back of his study. There's a tunnel beneath the church, dating back to when this was a stop on the Underground Railroad. It leads to the cemetery about a quarter-mile away. You two go, Wade said, checking his revolver. I'll create a diversion, draw them away from here. No, Nora protested. We stay together. She's right, the pastor agreed. The tunnel is wide enough for all of us. Hurry now. Wade hesitated, then nodded. The pastor opened the hidden door, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. He lit a lantern and handed it to Nora. God be with you, he said solemnly. I'll try to delay them if they come inside. Thank you, Nora said, impulsively hugging the old man, for everything. The three of them descended into the tunnel just as the sound of boots on the church steps reached their ears. The passage was low and narrow, forcing them to walk single file, bent at the waist. The air was musty but not stale. Somewhere ahead, fresh air was entering the tunnel. How long has it been since anyone used this? Wade whispered, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space. Not since the war ended, I'd imagine, Nora replied, though the pastor has obviously maintained it. They moved as quickly as possible through the darkness, the lantern casting eerie shadows on the earthen walls. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only 10 minutes, they reached a set of stairs leading upward. Wade went first, pushing against the trapdoor at the top. It opened with a groan of protesting hinges, revealing a small mausoleum in the cemetery. They emerged cautiously, relieved to find the graveyard deserted. We need to get to the sheriff's house without being seen, Wade said, extinguishing the lantern. It's on the other side of town. There's another way, Nora suggested. The creek runs behind most of the properties on Main Street. We can follow it and come up behind the sheriff's house. They made their way to the creek, staying low and using the trees for cover. The water was higher than usual due to the spring melt, forcing them to wade at times, the cold water seeping into their boots and clothing. If we survive this, Nora said through chattering teeth, I'm going to demand a proper courtship as compensation, Wade chuckled quietly. Fair enough. Though most courtships don't involve this much danger. Or this much water, Nora added, nearly slipping on a mossy rock. Wade caught her arm, steadying her. The brief contact sent a different kind of shiver through her, one that had nothing to do with the cold. They continued upstream until they reached the back of the sheriff's property. A small vegetable garden separated the creek from the modest house where Miller lived with his wife. I'll go first, Nora decided. Sarah knows me. She won't be frightened if I appear at her back door. Wade looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. Be careful, I'll be right behind you. Nora made her way through the garden, grateful for the covering of trees that shielded her from view of the main street. She reached the back porch and knocked softly on the door. After a moment, Sarah Miller appeared, her round face registering surprise. Nora Owens, good heavens, child, you're soaking wet. Come in at once. Is the sheriff home? Nora asked, hesitating on the threshold. No, he's out with his deputies, looking for some troublemakers who rode into town. Something about Price's men causing a disturbance at the church. Sarah ushered her inside. What in the world is going on? Nora signaled to Wade, who quickly joined them. Sarah's eyes widened at the sight of the armed stranger, but Nora quickly explained who he was and why they had come. Thomas's ledger, Sarah sighed, shaking her head. I told him keeping those records would get him killed one day. You knew about it, Nora asked. Of course, I helped him gather some of the information. My husband doesn't know I thought it safer that way. She moved to the kitchen and pulled out a loose brick from behind the stove, retrieving several folded pages. Here's what your father left with me. It's the worst of it, proof that Price has been bribing officials to look the other way while he runs guns to the Blackfoot. Wade examined the pages with growing excitement. This is it. With these and the pages from the pastor, we have enough to convince the federal marshals to act. But we still need to get this information to them, Nora pointed out. Price controls the telegraph office and his men are looking for us. Sarah moved to a cupboard and pulled out a dress and some of her husband's clothes. First, you both need to get into dry clothes before you catch your deaths, then we'll figure out how to get you safely out of town. As they changed in separate rooms, Nora's mind raced with possibilities. The nearest marshal's office was in Helena, at least 2 days' ride away. They'd need supplies, fresh horses, and a route that wouldn't take them past Price's men. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Wade and Sarah huddled over a map at the kitchen table. "I think I have a solution," Sarah was saying. "My brother runs the stage-coach station in Silver Creek, about 30 miles east of here. He can arrange to get you on the eastbound stage to Helena without anyone knowing." "How do we get to Silver Creek without being spotted?" Wade asked. "There's an old hunting trail through the mountains," Sarah explained, tracing a line on the map. "It's rough going, but it'll keep you off the main roads where Price's men will be watching." "We'll need supplies," Nora said, joining them at the table. "And weapons," Sarah nodded. "I can help with that. My husband keeps a spare rifle and ammunition here, and I can pack you enough food for the journey." "This is a lot of risk you're taking," Wade observed. "Price won't be happy if he finds out you've helped us." "Thomas Owens was my friend," Sarah said firmly. "And Harlan Price has been poisoning this town for too long. It's worth the risk to see him finally face justice." As Sarah prepared supplies for their journey, Nora and Wade studied the map, memorizing the route they would need to take. The hunting trail wound through rugged terrain, but it would keep them well away from Price's ranch and the main roads where his men would be watching. "We should leave at dusk," Wade suggested. "There will be enough light to start on the trail, but the darkness will help cover our departure." Nora nodded, though anxiety gnawed at her. The danger was mounting with every passing hour, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. "What if we don't make it?" she asked quietly, so Sarah wouldn't hear from the pantry where she was gathering food. "What if Price catches us before we reach the marshals?" Wade placed his hand over hers on the table, his touch warm and reassuring. "Then we fight, but I don't intend to let you down, Nora. We're going to make it." The sincerity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. Despite the madness of their circumstances, despite knowing him for barely a day, she found herself trusting him completely. It was a strange feeling for a woman who had learned to rely solely on herself. "I believe you," she said, surprised to realize she meant it. Sarah returned with a sack of provisions and her husband's spare rifle. "That should see you through to Silver Creek. James will help you once you're there." A sound from the front of the house made them all freeze. The front door opened and heavy footsteps entered the main room. "Sarah." Sheriff Miller called. "Are you home?" Sarah motioned for Nora and Wade to stay quiet, then went to meet her husband. They could hear the murmur of conversation, too low to make out the words. After a moment, Sarah returned, her expression troubled. "It's not safe for you to stay," she whispered. "Price has men watching all the roads out of town. They're going door to door, searching for you." "Is the sheriff with them?" Wade asked, his hand moving to his gun. "No," Sarah assured them. "He's trying to manage the situation, keep it from turning violent, but he can't hold them off forever." "You need to go now, through the back." They gathered their supplies quickly. Wade took the rifle and ammunition while Nora secured the precious ledger pages in an oilskin pouch that Sarah provided. "Thank you," Nora said, embracing the older woman, "for everything." "Your father would be proud of you," Sarah replied. "Now go and be careful. Trust no one until you reach the marshals." They slipped out the back door as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The shadows were lengthening, providing some cover as they made their way back to the creek, and then into the woods beyond. They moved as quickly as possible while staying alert for any sign of pursuit. As darkness fell, they reached the beginning of the hunting trail Sarah had marked on their map. It was little more than a game path, winding upward into the foothills of the mountain range that separated Willow Creek from Silver Creek. "We'll need to lead the horses through the narrower sections," Wade observed, dismounting. "It's going to be slow going in the dark." Nora climbed down from her horse, wincing as her feet touched the ground. Her boots, still damp from the creek, had rubbed blisters on her heels, and the long day had taken its toll on her body. But she said nothing, knowing they couldn't afford to stop. They pressed on, picking their way through the darkening forest by the light of a quarter moon. The trail climbed steadily, becoming steeper and more treacherous. Rocks skittered down the slope with each step, and the horses grew increasingly nervous. After several hours of difficult travel, they reached a small plateau where the trail widened briefly. Wade called a halt, knowing they needed rest. "We'll stop here for a few hours," he decided. "The horses need it, and so do we. I'll take first watch." Too exhausted to argue, Nora spread a blanket on the ground and lay down, using her saddle as a pillow. Despite her fatigue, sleep eluded her. The events of the past few days swirled in her mind: her father's murder, the hasty marriage, the discovery of the ledger pages, and the desperate flight from Price's men. "You should sleep," Wade said softly, noticing her restlessness. He sat nearby, the rifle across his knees, his profile sharp in the moonlight. "I can't," she admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I see my father falling. I hear the gunshot." Wade was silent for a moment. "After Daniel died, I had nightmares for months. Kept seeing the cave in, imagining his final moments. It nearly drove me mad." "How did you overcome it?" "I didn't, not completely," he said honestly, "but I found purpose in seeking justice. It gave me something to focus on beyond the grief." Nora sat up, drawing the blanket around her shoulders against the mountain chill. "Is that all this is to you? A mission of vengeance?" Wade considered the question. "It started that way, but now I think it's about more than that. It's about making things right, not just for Daniel or your father, but for everyone Price has hurt. And after, when Price is brought to justice, what then?" His eyes found hers in the darkness. "I haven't thought that far ahead. For so long, this mission has been my whole life. I'm not sure who I am without it." The vulnerability in his admission touched Nora deeply. Here was a man who had sacrificed everything: home, security, the chance for a normal life in pursuit of justice. Not unlike herself, who had given up her reputation and potentially her future by making a decision that most would consider insane: marrying a stranger to save her farm. "Maybe we're both a little crazy," she said with a small smile. "You for hunting a powerful man across the territory, me for hoping I could save my father's land alone." Wade's expression softened. "There's nothing crazy about hope, Nora. It takes courage to keep believing when everything and everyone tells you to give up." "They called me crazy for hoping," she said quietly, remembering the whispers in town after her mother died and she took over running the farm. "Said a woman alone had no business trying to hold onto such a place." Wade reached out, his hand finding hers in the darkness. "Then hope must be brave," he said simply. "And you, Nora Jackson, are the bravest person I've ever met." The way he said her married name sent an unexpected warmth through her. For the first time since her father's death, Nora felt something besides grief and fear. Something dangerously close to happiness. "You should try to sleep," Wade said, gently withdrawing his hand. "I'll wake you when it's your turn to watch." This time when Nora lay down, sleep came more easily, Wade's words echoing in her mind. Then hope must be brave. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps there was courage in continuing to hope, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Dawn broke clear and cold in the mountains. They ate a quick breakfast of jerky and hardtack from the supplies Sarah had provided, then continued their journey. The trail grew more difficult as they climbed higher, with loose rocks and steep drop-offs making each step treacherous. "We should reach the summit by midday," Wade said, studying the terrain ahead. "After that, it's all downhill to Silver Creek. Do you think they're following us?" Nora asked, glancing back down the trail. "Almost certainly," Wade replied grimly. "Price won't give up easily, especially now that we have the evidence that could ruin him." They pushed on, the air growing thinner as they climbed. Nora's legs ached and her lungs burned, but she refused to complain. Every step took them closer to safety, closer to justice for her father. As Wade had predicted, they reached the summit around noon. The view was breathtaking: miles of wilderness stretched in all directions, with the small settlement of Silver Creek visible in the valley below, its buildings tiny from this height. "We made it this far," Nora said, allowing herself a moment of relief. "The hardest part is behind us," Wade agreed. But we still need to be careful on the descent. One wrong step could the crack of a rifle shot cut him off. A bullet splintered the tree trunk inches from Nora's head, showering her with bark. "Get down," Wade shouted, pulling her behind a boulder as more shots rang out. They crouched together, hearts pounding as bullets ricocheted off rocks around them. Wade risked a quick look, then ducked back down. "3 riders about 100 yards back on the trail," he reported. "They've got us pinned down." Nora pulled out the revolver Sarah had given her. "I'm not a great shot, but I can provide covering fire if you have a plan." Wade's eyes widened slightly at her calm demeanor. "You continue to surprise me, Mrs. Jackson." He checked his ammunition. "We need to split up. I'll draw their fire while you make a run for the horses." "And then what?" "I'm not leaving you behind. We'll meet at the bottom of the eastern slope," Wade said, pointing to a stand of pines in the distance. "If I'm not there by nightfall, continue to Silver Creek without me." "That's a terrible plan," Nora protested. "We stay together." Wade's expression hardened. "This isn't a debate. Those men will kill us both and take the ledger back to Price. I won't let that happen." Before she could argue further, he leaned forward and kissed her a brief, fierce meeting of lips that left her stunned. "For luck," he said with a half smile. "Now, when I start shooting, you run. Don't look back." Without waiting for her response, Wade moved to the edge of the boulder and fired 3 quick shots toward their pursuers. Shouts and curses indicated at least one had found its mark. "Go." He yelled, continuing to fire as Nora sprinted to where their horses were tethered. Her hands shook as she untied the reins. The gunfire continued behind her, a deadly exchange that echoed off the mountainside. She mounted quickly, intending to circle around and help Wade despite his instructions. But as she turned her horse, she saw Wade running toward her, firing behind him as he came. One of Price's men had fallen, but the other 2 were in pursuit, bullets kicking up dirt at Wade's heels. "Ride," he shouted, reaching his own horse and swinging into the saddle in one fluid motion. They galloped down the eastern slope, the steep trail making for a harrowing descent. Loose rocks clattered beneath their horses' hooves, threatening to send them tumbling. Behind them, their pursuers continued to fire, but the distance and difficult terrain made accuracy impossible. The trail narrowed as they descended, winding through a dense forest of pine and aspen. They slowed to a trot, unable to maintain their breakneck pace on the treacherous path. "I think we've lost them for now," Wade said, glancing back, "but they won't give up. We need to keep moving." Nora nodded, her heart still racing from the chase. She touched her lips briefly, the memory of Wade's unexpected kiss still lingering. Now wasn't the time to dwell on it, but the moment had awakened something in her, a realization that her feelings for this man were growing into something far more complicated than gratitude or alliance. They continued downward, the forest gradually thinning as they approached the valley floor. By late afternoon, they had reached gentler terrain, and Silver Creek lay just a few miles ahead. "We should rest the horses before making the final push," Wade suggested, guiding them to a small stream where the animals could drink. As they dismounted, Nora noticed a dark stain on Wade's shirt. "You're hurt," she exclaimed, moving closer to examine him. Wade winced as he removed his jacket, revealing a bullet graze along his upper arm. "It's nothing, just a scratch." "A scratch that's been bleeding for hours," Nora countered, tearing a strip of fabric from her petticoat. "Let me clean it at least." She used water from the stream to wash the wound, then bound it tightly with the makeshift bandage. Wade watched her work, his expression unreadable. "You've done this before," he observed. "When you grow up on a farm, you learn to treat all kinds of injuries," she explained, tying off the bandage. "Though usually on animals, not stubborn cowboys." Wade chuckled, then winced at the movement. "Thank you, and I'm sorry about back there, the kiss, it wasn't proper." Nora felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Under the circumstances, propriety seems like the least of our concerns." She busied herself repacking their supplies. "Besides, you are technically my husband." "In name only," Wade reminded her, though something in his tone suggested he was no longer entirely comfortable with that arrangement. "Right," Nora agreed, avoiding his gaze. "In name only." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only by the sounds of the horses drinking and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Finally, Wade cleared his throat. We should reach Silver Creek before dark. Sarah's brother will help us get on the morning stage to Helena. And then? Nora asked, "What happens once we reach the marshals? They'll arrest Price using the evidence we've gathered. There will be a trial, probably in Helena where Price has less influence." Wade hesitated. "You'll need to testify about what happened to your father." Nora nodded, having expected as much. "And after the trial, what will you do then?" The question seemed to catch Wade off guard. I'm not sure. I've been focused on bringing Price to justice for so long, I haven't thought much beyond that." "You mentioned you were in the army," Nora said. "Will you go back?" Wade shook his head. "No, those days are behind me. I might try ranching again. I had a small spread before all this started." "Where?" "Wyoming Territory. Nothing fancy, just a few hundred acres and a decent herd." A shadow crossed his face. "Had to sell it to finance my search for evidence against Price." Nora felt a pang of sympathy. They had both lost so much to Harlan Price's greed. "Maybe you could start over, buy new land." "Maybe." Wade's eyes met hers. "What about you? Will you go back to your father's farm after all this?" The question struck Nora with unexpected force. Would she? The farm represented everything she had fought to save, her family's legacy, the only home she had ever known. And yet, the thought of returning there alone, with all its memories and ghosts, filled her with a peculiar emptiness. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never imagined being anywhere else but now. Now everything's changed," Wade finished for her. "Yes." She looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were standing, of how his presence had somehow become a comfort rather than a novelty in the short time they'd known each other. "Everything's changed." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then Wade stepped back, breaking the spell. "We should go," he said, his voice rougher than before. "We've lingered too long already." They mounted their horses and continued toward Silver Creek, each lost in their own thoughts about what the future might hold. The sun was beginning to set when they crested the final hill overlooking the small settlement, a single street lined with wooden buildings, the stage-coach station prominent among them. "We made it," Nora breathed, relief washing over her. "Not quite yet," Wade cautioned. "We still need to find Sarah's brother without drawing attention. Price could have men here too." They approached the town cautiously, sticking to the trees that bordered the main road. The stage-coach station was lit up, a few passengers milling about outside waiting for the evening stage heading west. "Wait here," Wade instructed, dismounting. "I'll go find James and make sure it's safe." "No, we stay together," Nora insisted, climbing down from her horse. "We've come this far as a team. I'm not waiting in the woods while you take all the risk." Wade looked like he might argue, but then nodded reluctantly. "Stay close and keep your head down. If anything happens, run for the marshal's office at the end of the street." They entered town as casually as possible, leading their horses and trying not to attract attention. The stage-coach station was busy with travelers, which worked to their advantage. They slipped inside, scanning the room for the station manager. "Can I help you folks?" asked a middle-aged man behind the counter, his resemblance to Sarah Miller unmistakable. "We're friends of your sister," Wade said quietly. "Sarah sent us, said you might help us get to Helena." James Miller's eyes narrowed, then widened in recognition. "You must be Nora Owens." "Sarah telegraphed about you," he glanced at Wade. "And you're the husband, Wade Jackson," Wade confirmed, offering his hand. "We need passage on tomorrow's eastbound stage and a place to lie low until then." "Of course," James said, lowering his voice. "There's a room above the station you can use. The stage leaves at dawn." He hesitated. "You should know there were men asking about you earlier. Rough types, said they were looking for a young couple traveling east." Nora and Wade exchanged alarmed glances. "Price's men beat us here," Wade muttered. "They must have taken the main road while we were in the mountains." "They're staying at the saloon across the street," James informed them. "I told them I hadn't seen anyone matching your description, but they might be watching the station." "Is there another way out of town?" Nora asked. James thought for a moment. The freight wagon leaves for Helena before the stage around 4 in the morning. It's not comfortable, but the driver, Hank, is a good man. He'd take you if I asked. That might be our best option, Wade decided. Less visible than the stage. I'll arrange it, James promised. For now, let me show you to that room. You both look like you could use some rest. He led them through a back door and up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room with a bed, washstand, and single window overlooking the rear of the station. I'll bring you some food, James said, and I'll take care of your horses. Don't leave this room until I come for you before dawn. After he left, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up to her. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hair a tangled mess, and every muscle in her body ached from the hard ride. You should rest, Wade said, taking up position by the window where he could watch the street below. I'll keep watch. You need rest too, she pointed out. You're wounded and you've barely slept since we left Willow Creek. I've gone longer without sleep, he assured her. Army training. But Nora could see the fatigue in the lines of his face, the slight droop of his shoulders. We'll take turns, she insisted. I'll wake you in a few hours. Wade looked ready to protest, but a knock at the door interrupted him. James entered with a tray of food, stew, bread, and coffee and clean towels. There's water in the pitcher for washing up, he said. I've spoken to Hank. He'll be ready for you at 4. I'll come get you when it's time. Thank you, Nora said warmly. We're in your debt. After James left, they ate in grateful silence, the hot food reviving their spirits. Nora used the water to clean the dirt from her face and hands, then combed through her tangled hair as best she could with her fingers. I must look a fright, she said, attempting humor to break the tension that had settled between them. Wade's gaze was warm as it rested on her. You look beautiful, he said simply, the sincerity in his voice making her breath catch. You always do. The compliment, unexpected and unadorned, brought color to Nora's cheeks. She wasn't accustomed to such words, especially not delivered with such quiet intensity. You should sleep, she said, deflecting her discomfort. I'll take first watch. Wade hesitated, then nodded, removing his gun belt but keeping his revolver within reach as he stretched out on the narrow bed. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened, exhaustion claiming him despite his vigilance. Nora moved to the window, taking up the watch. The town was quieting as evening deepened into night. A few patrons staggered from the saloon, and a dog barked somewhere in the distance. It all seemed so peaceful, so normal, a stark contrast to the danger that had pursued them for days. She found herself studying Wade as he slept. The hard lines of his face softened in repose, making him appear younger, less burdened. In the short time she had known him, he had become more than just an ally in her quest for justice. He had become someone she trusted, someone whose presence gave her strength. The realization was startling. She had always prided herself on her independence, on needing no one. Yet here she was, finding comfort in the companionship of a man who had entered her life under the most unusual of circumstances. This is madness, she whispered to herself. We barely know each other. And yet, there was an undeniable connection between them. Perhaps it was the shared danger, the common purpose, or something deeper that she couldn't quite name. Whatever it was, it made the thought of parting ways after the trial increasingly difficult to contemplate. Hours passed as Nora kept her vigil. The town grew quieter, only the occasional sound of a horse or late-night reveler breaking the silence. When the moon reached its zenith, she gently woke Wade as promised. Your turn, she said softly. Everything's been quiet. Wade sat up, instantly alert despite his interrupted sleep. You should have woken me sooner. You needed the rest, she countered, settling onto the bed. Wake me before James comes. Sleep claimed her quickly, deep and dreamless. It felt like only moments had passed when Wade's hand on her shoulder brought her back to consciousness. It's almost time, he said. James should be here soon. Nora sat up, disoriented for a moment before remembering where they were and why. Outside, the sky was still dark, though a faint lightening on the eastern horizon suggested dawn wasn't far off. Did you see anything suspicious during your watch? She asked, smoothing her hair and straightening her borrowed clothes. Wade shook his head. All quiet. But that doesn't mean Price's men have given up. A soft knock announced James's arrival. He entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bundle of clothes. "Hank's loading the wagon now," he said in a hushed voice. "I brought these for you, a change of clothes that might help you blend in better. The man who runs the general store owes me a favor." Nora accepted a simple calico dress, while Wade was given a workman's shirt and jacket. They took turns changing behind a screen in the corner of the room, the fresh clothes a welcome replacement for their trail-worn garments. "The ledger pages," Nora remembered suddenly. "Where are they?" "Safe," Wade assured her, patting his chest where the oilskin pouch was secured inside his new shirt. "I never let them out of my possession while you slept." James led them downstairs and out the back door of the station. The freight wagon waited in the alley, loaded with crates and mailbags. The driver, a burly man with a thick beard, nodded to them. "These the passengers you mentioned, James?" he asked in a gravelly voice. "Yes, they need to get to Helena as quietly as possible," Hank grunted. "Climb in the back. I've made a space behind them crates. Not comfortable, but you'll be out of sight." They thanked James once more, then climbed into the wagon, settling into the narrow space Hank had arranged among the cargo. It was cramped and dusty, but far preferable to facing Price's men again. "Try to keep still and quiet," Hank advised as he climbed onto the driver's seat. "Town's still sleeping, but there's always early risers." The wagon lurched forward, rumbling down the alley toward the main street. Nora and Wade huddled together in their hiding place, tense and alert. As they turned onto the main thoroughfare, Wade suddenly stiffened beside her. "What is it?" Nora whispered. "Someone just came out of the saloon," he murmured. "Can't see clearly, but it could be one of Burke's men." They held their breath as the wagon continued past the saloon. For a moment it seemed they would pass unnoticed. Then a shout rang out. "Hey, stop that wagon!" Hank hesitated only briefly before cracking his whip, urging the horses to a faster pace. The wagon lurched forward, nearly dislodging Nora from her precarious perch. "Hold on." Wade warned, grabbing her arm to steady her. Behind them, the sound of running boots and more shouting indicated their pursuers were giving chase. A shot rang out, splintering wood near their hiding place. "Get down." Wade pushed Nora lower among the crates as he drew his revolver. The wagon picked up speed as it left the town behind, the horses straining under Hank's urgent commands. But the sound of hoofbeats behind them grew louder. Their pursuers had mounted and were closing in. "We can't outrun them in this wagon," Nora realized. "They'll catch us before we get halfway to Helena." Wade's expression was grim as he checked his ammunition. "We need to make a stand or find somewhere to hide." Another bullet whizzed past, this one striking one of the mailbags near Nora's head. Hank cursed and urged the horses to greater speed, but the heavy wagon could only move so fast on the rough road. "There's a bridge ahead," Hank called back to them. "Crosses Miller's Creek. It's old and narrow, might slow them down if they're on horseback." "Or trap us on the other side," Wade muttered, but they had few options. The bridge appeared ahead, a wooden structure spanning a deep, fast-flowing creek swollen with spring runoff. As they thundered onto the weathered planks, Wade made a decision. "When we reach the other side, we jump," he told Nora. "The creek will provide cover and the banks are heavily wooded. We can lose them there." Nora nodded, her heart pounding as she prepared herself for the leap. The moment the wagon cleared the bridge, Wade grabbed her hand. "Now." They vaulted over the side, landing hard on the muddy bank. The impact knocked the wind from Nora's lungs, but Wade was already pulling her to her feet, dragging her toward the cover of the trees as bullets kicked up dirt around them. "The ledger," Nora gasped. "Do you still have it?" Wade patted his chest, confirming the precious documents were secure. They plunged into the underbrush, the dense foliage providing immediate concealment. Behind them, they heard shouts of confusion as their pursuers reached the far side of the bridge. "They've gone into the woods," someone yelled. "Spread out and find them." "This way," Wade whispered, leading Nora deeper into the forest. They moved as quietly as possible, staying low and using the trees for cover. The sound of men crashing through the underbrush behind them grew fainter as they put distance between themselves and the road. After what felt like hours but was likely only 30 minutes of tense travel, they reached a small clearing where a fallen log provided a moment's rest. Both were breathing hard, clothes torn and mudded from their flight. "You think we lost them?" Nora asked between breaths. Wade listened intently. "For now, but they won't give up easily. We need to keep moving." He glanced up at the sun, now risen enough to provide direction. "Helena is northeast. If we keep the sun on our right, we should be heading in the right direction. How far is it, on foot?" "At least 2 days, maybe 3 through this terrain." Wade's expression was troubled. "Without horses or supplies, it won't be easy." "We don't have a choice," Nora said, rising to her feet with determination. "We've come too far to give up now." Wade studied her face, a slow smile spreading across his features. "You really are the bravest person I've ever met, Nora Jackson." The way he said her married name sent a warm flutter through her chest. "Not brave," she corrected him, "just stubborn." "I'll take stubborn," he said, still smiling as he rose to stand beside her. "Stubborn has gotten us this far." They continued through the forest, maintaining a northeasterly direction as best they could without a compass. The day grew warmer, and Nora's throat burned with thirst. They had no canteen, no food, nothing but the clothes on their backs and the precious evidence hidden in Wade's shirt. By midday, they reached a small stream where they drank gratefully and rested their tired feet. Wade fashioned a crude canteen from a section of hollow log sealed with pine sap so they could carry water as they traveled. "You're quite resourceful," Nora observed as she watched him work. "Where did you learn such skills?" "My father was a trapper before he settled down to ranch," Wade explained. "He taught me how to survive in the wild, said a man never knows when such knowledge might mean the difference between life and death." "He was right," Nora said, thinking of their current predicament. "My father taught me about farming, about working the land, but survival in the wilderness wasn't part of my education." "You're a quick learner," Wade assured her, "and you've got more grit than most men I've known." The compliment warmed her, even as exhaustion and hunger gnawed at her resolve. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the terrain growing more difficult as they entered foothills that would eventually lead to the mountains separating them from Helena. As dusk approached, Wade located a small cave formed by an outcropping of rock just large enough to provide shelter for the night. They gathered pine boughs for bedding and risked a tiny fire, more for warmth than light. "We should reach more populated areas by tomorrow evening," Wade said as they huddled close to the flames. "Maybe find a farm where we can get help." Nora nodded, too tired to speak. The day's journey had drained her completely, and the hunger was becoming difficult to ignore. She leaned against Wade's shoulder, seeking warmth and comfort. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I never meant to put you through this kind of hardship." "You didn't put me through anything," she countered, her voice weary but firm. "This was my choice. My father's murder, my farm, my future. I chose to fight for them." "Our future," Wade corrected gently. "Whether this marriage is temporary or not, right now we're in this together." Nora looked up at him, studying his face in the flickering firelight. "When all this is over, what happens to us?" It was the question that had been lingering between them, unspoken but ever present. Wade's gaze held hers, serious and thoughtful. "That depends," he said carefully, "on what you want." "What if I don't know what I want?" Nora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's changed so quickly. A week ago, all I wanted was to save my father's farm. Now, Wade prompted when she trailed off. Nora took a deep breath. "Now I'm not sure the farm is enough anymore, not by itself." The admission cost her, revealing a vulnerability she rarely showed to anyone. But Wade didn't seem to think less of her for it. Instead, his arm tightened around her shoulders. "When I agreed to this marriage," he said slowly, "I meant what I said about it being temporary if that's what you wanted. I wouldn't hold you to vows made under such circumstances. And if that's not what I wanted," the words slipped out before she could stop them. Wade's eyes darkened. "Then I would consider myself the luckiest man alive to have found someone like you, someone brave enough to hope when others called it crazy." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to Nora's eyes. She had known this man for only days, yet somehow he understood her in ways no one else ever had. "We should sleep," she said, unable to address the emotions his words had stirred. "Tomorrow will be another long day," Wade nodded, though something like disappointment flickered across his features. They settled onto the pine boughs, lying close for warmth, the small fire dying to embers beside them. Despite her exhaustion, Nora lay awake for some time, acutely aware of Wade's presence beside her, of the steady rhythm of his breathing, of the strange new feelings taking root in her heart. Morning came with a light rain, dampening their already sodden spirits. They ate a few wild berries Wade found growing nearby, not enough to satisfy their hunger, but better than nothing. The water from their makeshift canteen soothed their parched throats as they prepared to continue their journey. "The rain will make tracking us more difficult," Wade observed, studying the cloudy sky. "That works in our favor." They set off, moving more slowly than the previous day due to fatigue and hunger. The terrain grew increasingly steep as they climbed higher into the foothills. By midday, the rain had stopped, but dark clouds still lingered overhead, threatening to resume at any moment. "Look," Wade said suddenly, pointing ahead to where a thin column of smoke rose above the trees. "Could be a homestead." Hope surged through Nora, or a logging camp. "Either way, it means people." They approached cautiously, mindful that Price's men could be anywhere. As they drew closer, a small cabin came into view, nestled in a clearing with a fenced garden and a modest barn. A woman was hanging laundry on a line, while two young children played nearby. "Wait here," Wade instructed, adjusting his clothing to look less disheveled. "Let me make sure it's safe." Nora watched from the shelter of the trees as Wade approached the cabin, hands visible to show he meant no harm. The woman noticed him, her posture immediately wary as she called the children to her side. Wade spoke to her, gesturing occasionally toward the woods where Nora waited. After several minutes, the woman nodded and Wade waved for Nora to join them. "This is Mrs. Chen," Wade said as Nora approached. "Her husband is a logger, working at a camp a few miles from here. She's agreed to give us a meal and directions to Helena." Mrs. Chen was a small woman with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "You look hungry," she said to Nora. "Come inside, food almost ready." The cabin was simple but spotlessly clean, with evidence of the family's Chinese heritage in the decorations and cooking utensils. A pot of stew simmered over the fire, the aroma making Nora's stomach growl audibly. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Chen urged, already ladling the stew into wooden bowls. "You eat, then rest. Too dangerous to travel in storm." Sure enough, rain had begun to fall again, harder this time, drumming on the cabin's roof. The children watched Nora and Wade with curious eyes as they devoured the simple but delicious stew. "Your husband, he work in Helena sometimes, Mrs. Chen asked as she refilled their bowls. "No," Nora replied. "We're traveling there on business." Mrs. Chen nodded, seeming to understand there was more to the story. "Bad men come yesterday," she said. "Ask if we see strangers. My husband say no, send them away. They look like trouble." Wade and Nora exchanged alarmed glances. "These men," Wade said carefully. "Were they armed? Did they say who they were looking for?" "Very armed," Mrs. Chen confirmed. "Say they look for young couple running from law, but my husband no real law. These men not real law." "They're not," Nora agreed. "They work for a man named Harlan Price. He's the one who's broken the law, not us." Mrs. Chen's expression darkened. "Price, bad man, try to take land from Chinese miners last year, say they have no rights." She studied them with new interest. "You fight this man?" "Yes," Wade said simply. "We have evidence of his crimes. That's why his men are hunting us to stop us from reaching the federal marshals in Helena." The woman nodded decisively. "Then we help. My husband returned tonight. He take you to Logging Road tomorrow. From there, wagon go to Helena every day with lumber." Relief washed over Nora. "We can't thank you enough." "No thanks needed," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Fight bad men, that thanks enough." As the afternoon wore on, the rain continued to fall, making travel impossible. Mrs. Chen insisted they rest, preparing a pallet for them near the fire. Her husband would sleep in the barn when he returned, giving the strangers his place in the family's sleeping area. Nora helped Mrs. Chen prepare the evening meal. grateful for the normalcy of domestic tasks after days of danger and flight. The children gradually overcame their shyness, especially when Wade carved them simple wooden animals from scraps in the woodpile. "You're good with children," Nora observed as she watched him entertain the little ones with his creations. Wade shrugged, though his smile was warm. "My brother had 2 boys. I was their favorite uncle." "Were," Nora asked softly. "Are," Wade corrected himself. "They live with their mother in California now. I haven't seen them since Daniel died." A shadow crossed his face. "Another thing Price took from me." Nora squeezed his hand briefly. "When this is over, you'll see them again." As darkness fell, Mr. Chen returned, soaked from the rain but welcoming to the strangers his wife had taken in. After hearing their story, he immediately offered to guide them to the logging road the next morning. "Many wagon go to Helena," he explained over dinner. "You hide in lumber no one see, very safe." "Your kindness means more than we can say," Wade told him. "You're taking a risk helping us like this." Mr. Chen shook his head. "Price men threatened my family last year, say go back to China, but this our home now, America." He met Wade's gaze steadily. "We fight too in our way." That night, lying on the pallet near the fire, Nora and Wade spoke in hushed tones, mindful of the family sleeping nearby. "We're close," Wade murmured. "Another day, maybe 2, and we'll reach Helena, then this will all be over." And then Nora couldn't help asking again. Wade was silent for a long moment. "Then you'll be free to make your choice, about the farm, about us." "What if I've already made my choice?" Nora whispered, her heart pounding as she finally admitted what she had been feeling for days. Wade turned to face her, his expression hidden in the darkness. "Have you?" "I think so," she said softly. "I think I started making it the moment you walked onto my porch and offered to help a stranger." Wade's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers warm as they intertwined with her own. "I'm glad," he said simply, the words carrying more meaning than 1,000 declarations. They fell asleep like that, hands joined, the future suddenly seeming less uncertain despite the dangers that still lay ahead. Morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. After a hearty breakfast, Mr. Chen led them through the forest to the logging road, a wide dirt path rutted by the passage of heavy wagons. They walked for several hours until they reached the logging camp, a collection of rough buildings surrounding a clearing where massive logs were being processed. Mr. Chen spoke to the foreman, a burly man with a thick beard, who agreed to hide them among the lumber being sent to Helena that afternoon. By sunset, they were nestled in a space created between stacks of cut timber, the wagon rumbling along the logging road toward the territorial capital. The journey was uncomfortable but uneventful. They arrived in Helena shortly after dawn the next day, stiff and sore but triumphant. The federal marshal's office was located near the courthouse, and they made their way there directly, ignoring their disheveled appearance and the curious stares of passers-by. Marshal Everett was a tall, stern-faced man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Wade and Nora presented their evidence, laying out the ledger pages on his desk. "This is serious," he said when they had finished. "Price has friends in high places, but this evidence is compelling, especially the gun running charges." He studied them both. "You've taken considerable risks bringing this to me." "My father died for this evidence," Nora said firmly, "and Wade's brother before him. We couldn't let Price continue his crimes unchecked." Marshal Everett nodded gravely. "I'll need sworn statements from both of you. And you'll have to testify when the case comes to trial." "We understand," Wade assured him. "When will you move against Price?" "I'll telegraph the judge for arrest warrants immediately," the marshal said. "Then I'll gather my deputies and ride for Willow Creek. With luck, we can have Price in custody by tomorrow evening." "We're coming with you," Nora declared, her tone brooking no argument. Marshal Everett frowned. "That wouldn't be wise, Mrs. Jackson. Price's men will be looking for you." "Precisely why we should be there," Wade countered. "We know their faces, their tactics, and Nora deserves to see justice done for her father." After some argument, the marshal reluctantly agreed. "But you'll stay with my deputies at all times," he insisted. "No heroics." They spent the day giving their statements and preparing for the return to Willow Creek. The marshal provided them with fresh clothes and rooms at a local hotel where they gratefully bathed and rested before the journey ahead. That evening, as they shared a quiet meal in the hotel dining room, Nora found herself watching Wade with new eyes. The danger wasn't over yet, but for the first time since her father's death, she felt hope for the future, a future that, increasingly, she couldn't imagine without Wade in it. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About what comes after," she admitted. "After Price is arrested, after the trial," Wade set down his fork, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "And what do you see in this after?" Nora took a deep breath. "I see my father's farm, but not as it was not me alone, struggling to keep it going. I see something new, something shared." Understanding dawned in Wade's eyes, along with something that looked remarkably like hope. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Nora?" "I'm saying that our marriage may have begun as an arrangement of convenience," she said carefully, "but I find myself hoping it might become something more, something real." Wade reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I've been hoping the same thing," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Ever since that night on the mountain when you looked at me and didn't see a stranger but a partner. Is that what we are, partners?" "That and more," Wade said softly, "if you'll have me. Not just for now or until Price is dealt with, but for always." Nora's heart swelled with a happiness she had never expected to feel again after her father's death. "I'll have you," she whispered, "for always." The journey back to Willow Creek the next day was tense but uneventful. Marshal Everett had gathered 6 deputies, all experienced lawmen armed with Winchester rifles and stern expressions. They rode hard, reaching the outskirts of town by dusk. "Price's ranch is north of town," Wade informed the marshal. "About 5 miles, he'll have men watching the approaches." "We'll camp here tonight," Everett decided. "Move in at first light when they're least expecting trouble." The camp was quiet, the mood somber as they prepared for the confrontation to come. Nora sat beside Wade near the fire, their shoulders touching, drawing comfort from each other's presence. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Only of losing what we've found," Wade admitted. "Everything else I can face." Dawn broke clear and cold, with mist rising from the fields as they approached Price's ranch. The main house came into view, a ostentatious 2-story structure that spoke of wealth and power. Several smaller buildings surrounded it: bunkhouse, barn, stables, smokehouse. Men were already moving about, starting the day's work. Marshal Everett divided his deputies, sending 2 around to the back of the property, while he and the others approached from the front, Wade and Nora riding slightly behind. They were spotted before they reached the main gate. A sentry fired a warning shot, and suddenly the ranch was alive with armed men taking positions. "Harlan Price," Marshal Everett called, his voice carrying across the yard. "Federal Marshal, I have warrants for your arrest. Surrender peacefully." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the front door of the house opened, and Harlan Price stepped onto the porch. He was a tall man with silver hair and cold eyes, dressed like a gentleman despite the early hour. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, though his eyes fixed on Nora and Wade with unmistakable recognition. "Harlan Price, you are under arrest for the murders of Thomas Owens and Daniel Jackson, for illegal weapons trafficking, bribery of public officials, and numerous counts of fraud." Marshal Everett's voice was steady as he read from the warrant. "Surrender your weapons and come peacefully." Price's expression hardened. "These are ridiculous charges. I'm a respected businessman in this territory." "We have evidence, Price," Wade called. "The ledger, all of it. Your gun running, your bribes, your murders disguised as accidents. It's over." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Price's face before his mask of arrogance returned. "My men outnumber you, Marshal. You won't take me alive." "Maybe not," Everett replied coolly. "But a lot of your men will die trying to protect you. Is that what you want, gentlemen?" he called to the ranch hands. "To die for a man who's about to hang for murder?" The tension was palpable as the standoff continued. Some of Price's men exchanged uncertain glances, clearly reconsidering their loyalty in the face of federal marshals. "This is your last chance, Price," Everett warned. Surrender now." For a moment, it seemed Price might actually comply. Then his hand darted beneath his coat, emerging with a revolver aimed directly at Nora. "You should have left well enough alone, girl," he snarled. Wade moved faster than thought, spurring his horse forward and shoving Nora's mount aside as Price fired. The bullet caught Wade in the shoulder, knocking him from his saddle as chaos erupted across the ranch yard. Gunfire exploded from all sides as the marshals engaged Price's men. Nora scrambled to Wade's side, dragging him behind a water trough as bullets whizzed overhead. "Wade," she cried, seeing the blood spreading across his shirt. "No, no, no, I'm all right," he gasped, though his face was pale with pain. "Just winged me. Where's Price?" Nora risked a glance over the trough. Price was no longer on the porch. He was running toward the stables, using the confusion of the gunfight as cover. "He's getting away," she reported, "heading for the horses." Wade struggled to sit up, his right arm hanging useless at his side. "We can't let him escape, not after everything." "You're wounded," Nora protested. "You need to stay here." "Then you go," Wade said, pressing his revolver into her hand. "Stop him, Nora. Finish this." She hesitated, torn between staying with Wade and pursuing her father's killer. Then determination hardened her resolve. "I'll be back," she promised, squeezing his good hand before slipping away, keeping low as she moved from cover to cover toward the stables. She reached the building just as Price was saddling a magnificent black stallion. His back was to her as he worked, cursing under his breath. "Stop right there, Price," Nora called, aiming Wade's revolver at him. "It's over." Price froze, then turned slowly to face her. "Well, well, Thomas Owens' little girl, you're as stubborn as your father was." "And you're a murderer," Nora replied, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "My father discovered what you were doing running guns, cheating honest people. He was going to expose you." "He was a fool," Price spat. "Just like you're a fool if you think you can stop me." His eyes narrowed. "You won't shoot me, girl. You don't have it in you." "You're wrong," Nora said, taking a step closer. "I've lost everything because of you. My father, my home, my future. I have nothing left to lose." Price's hand moved suddenly, reaching for a hidden weapon. Nora's finger tightened on the trigger, but before she could fire, a shot rang out from the stable entrance. Price staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face as he fell to his knees. Nora whirled to see Sheriff Miller standing in the doorway, his smoking revolver still raised. Behind him, Wade leaned heavily against the doorframe, his injured arm bound with a makeshift bandage. "I wanted to do that for a long time," the sheriff said grimly. "For Thomas and for all the others Price has hurt over the years." Price collapsed to the ground, clutching his chest where blood spread across his fine suit. His eyes found Nora's one last time, filled with hatred and disbelief, before the light in them faded forever. It was over. The man who had murdered her father, who had threatened to destroy everything she held dear, was dead. Justice, in its way, had been served. Sheriff Miller approached, holstering his weapon. "I came as soon as I got word the marshals were moving against Price. Figured you might need an insider who knows the layout of the ranch." "Thank you," Nora said sincerely, "for everything." "Your father was a good man," Miller replied. "One of the best I knew. He deserved better than what happened to him." Wade made his way to Nora's side, his face pale but determined. "Is it done?" he asked, looking at Price's still form. "It's done," she confirmed, moving to support him as he swayed slightly. "Now we can go home." The gunfire outside had ceased, suggesting the marshals had subdued the remaining ranch hands. As they emerged from the stables, Marshal Everett approached, looking relieved to see them alive. "Price?" he asked simply. "Dead," Sheriff Miller reported. He drew on Miss Owens, Mrs. Jackson. "I had no choice." Everett nodded, accepting the explanation without question. "His men have surrendered. Most of them claim they didn't know about the gun running or the murders. We'll sort out the guilty from the merely complicit." Over the next few days, order was restored to Willow Creek. With Price gone and his criminal enterprise exposed, many who had suffered under his reign of terror came forward with their own stories. Judge Reynolds was arrested for accepting bribes, and several of Price's most loyal men faced charges related to the murders and illegal weapons trafficking. Nora and Wade returned to the Owens farm, which was officially theirs now that the false debts had been invalidated. The spring planting was late but not impossible, and neighbors who had kept their distance under Price's influence now came to offer help. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the fields golden, Wade took Nora's hand in his. "I've been thinking," he said, "about our future." "What about it?" Nora asked, though she had a feeling she knew what was coming. "This marriage began as a way to save your farm," Wade said carefully. "But it's become so much more to me. I love you, Nora Jackson, not because you're brave, though you are, not because you're stubborn, though that too, but because you hoped when others would have given up. Because you saw something in me worth believing in." Nora's heart swelled with emotion. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have from the beginning, from the moment you called hope brave." Wade smiled, reaching into his pocket to produce a small gold ring. "Then would you do me the honor of marrying me, for real this time, no marshals chasing us, no gunfights looming, just us choosing each other freely?" Tears of happiness filled Nora's eyes as she held out her hand. "Yes," she said simply, "for always." They were married again 3 weeks later, in the small church where Pastor Williams had once hidden evidence that would bring down Harlan Price. This time, the ceremony was attended by friends and neighbors, including Sheriff and Sarah Miller, the Chen family who had helped them on their journey, and even Marshal Everett, who had traveled from Helena for the occasion. As summer turned to fall, the Owens now Jackson farm produced a bountiful harvest, enough to pay off the remaining legitimate debts and set aside a nest egg for the future. Wade proved to be as skilled with crops as he had been with cattle, and Nora's knowledge of the land complemented his experience perfectly. Winter brought quiet evenings by the fire, planning for the spring and dreaming of the future they would build together. When the first crocuses pushed through the melting snow the following March, Nora had news of her own to share. "I hope you're ready for a new addition to our family," she told Wade one morning as they watched the sunrise from their porch. "Come September, we'll be 3 instead of 2. The joy that spread across Wade's face was all the confirmation she needed that hope brave, stubborn hope had been worth every hardship they had endured. Together, they had found not just justice, but a love that had begun in the unlikeliest of circumstances and grown into something neither of them had dared to dream possible. Years later, when their children asked how they had met, Wade would smile at Nora across the dinner table and say, "Your mother was hoping for a miracle when everyone else said it was crazy. And I told her then what I still believe now: hope must be brave. And she is the bravest woman I've ever known."